Hello, hello. I see some people have joined. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kelly Jo Horton, and I think everybody that I saw in the comments so far. I'm a senior client partner at Atumos, and this is basically a really early morning version of Mops Talks Coffee Talk. And I have two guests today. I have Jessica Meyers from Patient Pop Tebra, now Tebra, and AJ Navarro from Shift Paradigm. And I invited these two because we all met at a conference this summer called Summer Camp. And we had a lot of discussions in there that were super interesting. So I wanted different perspectives today. So anything you guys want to say about yourselves, you can do a short intro and then we will get right into it. And I just want to say, for those people who are on, this is not one of those recorded sessions. We got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, Jessica and I did anyway. And we are live. So please type your questions into the comments if you have questions as we go. Jessica, anything you want to say about yourself?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jessica. I'm the Director of MarketingOps and Technology at now Tebra, going through a big merger rebrand. I am a few times over Marketo Certified, including the most recent Architect exam and a current Marketo 2022 Champion.
AJ, anything?
Yep. How's it going, everybody? My name is AJ Navarro. I am a consultant over at Shift Paradigm. I am based out of San Antonio, Texas. So if you are ever in the Texas area, please feel free to let me know. I am also MCE certified, well-versed in Marketo, Bizible, and now working on my certifications for Sixth Sense and Salesforce. So happy to be here.
AJ, did you point out that you're in Central Time just to let us know that you didn't have to get up at 6
a.m.? Yeah, really. Anybody else, if you're on West Coast time, I feel you if you're in the comments. Anyway, okay, so we had, I'm really bummed out, by the way. I had coffee here. Don't know where it is. It's not on my desk. So I'm not caffeinated, and I'm really bummed about that. I left it somewhere in my house. So after this, I will be getting a lot of coffee. So we had asked people to submit some questions online beforehand, and we also had some topics that we wanted to chat about, but treat this just like you would any other MOPS talk. If you've ever been to a MOPS talk, it is an open forum to discuss anything, all things RevOps, MOPS, whatever. Let's talk about your problems today. Think of us as MOPS therapists, okay? So let's start with, we had an anonymous question submitted, and that was one of the options. You don't have to be named, but if you want to be on camera, you can, or if you just want to ask your question and have us read it out, you can too. So, I mean, I'm sure we all get asked this a lot, but do you guys see any innovations or trends that are happening, maybe even especially since the pandemic? So what do you think is going to change, like in the next 6, 12 months, 2 years in the MOPS world or the RevOps? Can be anything. Can be about technology or structure of team or anything. What do you think, Jessica?
I thought about this question a bit since we got it submitted. And I think I had a couple directions I could go with this question. But the trend I want to talk about, or innovation I want to talk about, is the emergence and really power of some of these centralization tools and low code or medium code automation tools that are coming out. I'm talking about your Workato, your Syncery, some of the tools that you can plug into all of the different elements of a really dispersed tech stack and centralize a ton of processes where you used to have to daisy chain things in Marketo or your other marketing automation platform, in your sales engagement tool, maybe with automation in your Salesforce, something to alert your sales team. And you used to have to kind of just either hope that things worked or wait for syncs back and slow down the process. And the emergence of these kinds of tools is really allowing for more centralization, which I think in turn will start to centralize more teams under a central like business systems or revenue operations team as opposed to formally dispersed teams.
I think I'm seeing more of that too, and I find myself going to that for a solution for a lot of things. However, iPaaS, middleware, whatever you want to call it, has been around a long time. I mean, back in the day when I was consulting at Marketo, we used to use Boomi to connect everything, but it wasn't low code, right? You had to have a developer do it. And I think the difference, like you're saying, the difference now is with the Tray IOs and the Workatos and all those iPaaS solutions. And even, I've used Zapier before too. So it's more low code. Of course, if you want to do anything really cool, you need to know JavaScript or some other language on these platforms. But yeah, I think I find myself when anyone has a difficult problem, any client I'm working with, I'm like, oh, you could use an iPaaS platform for that. Do you have someone who knows how to code a little bit? But anyway, so
Zapier was my first foray into one of them, and when I moved in-house, inherited a Zapier instance that a former predecessor had done some really cool stuff in, and I think kind of like opened my eyes on some things. And I worked with the Boomies and some of those guys in the world, but the ability for somebody who is not a developer but knows enough to kind of work in those is, I think, really democratizing access.
Yeah, I think it's super important. We have a question, Tucker. That's so funny. Do we feel Adobe will ever overhaul Design Studio? Adding Adobe design capabilities. Anyone who was at, I don't know, it was Adobe Summit. I think it was the first year it was in Vegas. So however many years ago that was, I remember them saying, because when Adobe acquired Marketo, I specifically remember them talking about integrating all kinds of stuff like that right into Marketo. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to be able to Photoshop something and just dump the graphic into Marketo. None of that has happened. I'm still waiting for permission-based folders, which they promised like a million years ago. So yeah.
Do is the permission-based folders, or just a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the Design Studio area.
Yeah, so I haven't
totally understand that.
I remember sitting there being so excited about all that stuff, the integration possibilities, and nothing has happened. It's a summit lie, right, Kimmy? I see. We call them summit lies. It's so they're not. Anyway, AJ, did you have any comment on what you think the trends are? Do you agree with the iPaaS middleware thing?
I definitely agree there. I'll backtrack a little bit as far as just my personal thoughts on where I see MOPS going or what's coming from. I think from a team standpoint, I think if you are in this role, even as an associate, maybe you're getting into the MOPS for the first time, there's this big mentality of doing a lot with less right now. And I'm starting to see a lot of, either Marketo people or just admins, like not only really become builders, but really hone what it means to be a true SME and get their voice really resonated. And I just think that right now, as people or organizations are scaling down, are really honing in and making sure they're spending their dollars wisely, you have the chance to be, really grab a seat at that table and kind of really build your reputation as a MOPS person or RevOps person, and really get intertwined in that and just become really strategic and just get away from just, here's the nurture program, go build it, offer really good insights. So I think with where we're going, there's just that unique opportunity that's present right now, and I would totally take advantage of it.
All right. I think I see the trend. I mean, I've been in so many different organizations and moved around between organizations within a company so many times. I like And I think the more tools you have and the more complex things get, centralization just seems like the way to go. If you have tools owned by organizations all across the company, you will have a mess, I think, because you have to think of it like one big pool, right? And if somebody drops something in the water, that ripple effect goes through the entire pool. And if systems are owned by other people, you don't know, somebody dropped something in the pond somewhere else and it just affects you and the ripple hits you and then your data is all messed up and all that stuff. So I see a centralization and more because that's one reason, also because people are recognizing how important this role is and this whole group is, and they're starting to promote people. There are now VP, of MOPS or RevOps or whatever, and not a VP of RevOps that's just a salesperson, which doesn't count in my opinion. If you heard the podcast I did, no, that's not operations. That's revenue, but not operations. So anyway, I see centralization with a combination of like business systems and for the company stuff, business systems like the old IT type plus, a MOPS centralized demand center or something like that.
So I like the idea too, because I feel like with centralization, it reduces the amount of time it takes to just constantly hand things off and constantly follow up on other things. Like, you have a dedicated person and our person that centralize, where to go versus kind of having to jump through the various hurdles there.
Mm-hmm. So Kelly, if you were designing like your perfect org chart for a company, who or where would the centralized systems team sit and who would they report to?
They would not report to the director of demand gen. I think that's the most ridiculous supporting structure. I get it if you're a small company and you don't have a big org, but I've reported to a CTO and a CMO before, and I think we're beyond reporting to a CTO or maybe even a CMO, and it should be whoever is, if there's a RevOps organization that kind of looks at sales and marketing together and not separately, I would have the VP of whatever you want to call it. You can call it a demand center, you can call it VP of RevOps or whatever, but the centralized organization. And I'm also big into the hub and spoke model, not to lock everybody out of these systems, but to have the administration owned by the central group. And then, don't let everybody have admin rights. I see that so much. I'm sorry, but I do. I still see it because people don't know how to create new roles and permissions. And so they give everyone admin rights. Don't do that. So I just see it as a way to have real good governance because it's super important when you have so much data these days and people are making really important decisions based on data. And if your data, if you're making hiring, firing, and, if you're not public and you have a board and you're talking about going public or something like that, and you're making decisions on that data, it better be right. So if we probably unfortunately don't have any managers on this call. We have a lot of people who are like, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? It's too bad because the managers need to understand that your data is gold. And if you don't centralize everything and have people who understand the data and the flow and the hygiene of it all, you're a mess. You're going to be a mess. So I'm all for us having a seat at the table for sure. And not being order takers and being told what to do, but being part of the crew that makes decisions and actually has some influence and is respected and influenced. And now I can get off my soapbox because I could talk about that for an hour. I have been pushing for this for so many years. It's finally happening very slowly, but some companies get it, some don't, and they're going to be in trouble. So anyway, do you guys have any favorite org structures that you've worked in or that you would design from scratch? What about you? What about your org structure, Jessica?
I report into the VP of Demand Gen.
No! Oh, no!
I will say, I think I'm lucky in that my Demand Gen VP is super operational in nature and has a really good understanding of what ops can and should be, and has given me a lot of flexibility to build the org that I want within our centralized MOPS team. I also, one of my priorities when I came in-house was establishing a really good relationship with our business systems team. They kind of anchor in and around Salesforce and some of our like billing and those kinds of systems. But establishing a partner on that team to help with the Salesforce things that I needed was really important. I have worked with clients in the past who had like more centralized revenue ops teams, and I think those tend to work really, really well. I think almost more important than, equally as important at the very least, as to who you report to, is how much does the person you report to understand what your team's goals and function is and the potential of your team.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Because you can report into a rev ops leader who's just sales ops in disguise.
Exactly.
Then they just
if somebody's
want
just
you to do sales ops things.
Exactly. So it doesn't, that's very, very true. Hopefully there's some understanding at the level above you and the C-level about what the team does, because otherwise there's no boundaries to the job ever too. Kimmy made a comment about when you're centralized and you have a lot of tools that, you know, when people ask you to implement things, right, if the tool doesn't have a clear owner, then you end up taking care of everything. I think, right, that's what she's saying. We do it all, right? So I just shared this with you, Jessica, yesterday, and you may not have looked at it, but I have a procurement process. And one of the pieces of my procurement process, if somebody wants to buy a tool, is that our team, we would be involved in that process from the very beginning, because what usually happens is other teams don't vet the vendors properly. They get a demo of something shiny and it looks really good, of course, because who's going to demo the stuff that doesn't work? And also if somebody is in the demo who doesn't understand, like how to talk about the integration or the data or anything like that you need us in that conversation. And you always need a clear owner of the tool for the administration. You need a champion outside of your group, like whichever groups are going to use it, there has to be champion in that group that's really, really trained to sort of field all the questions before they get down to the MOPS team. Like somebody has to own it for onboarding these other people, for being the champion. And then that's fine if we can be the admins and we can help the champion, but let's train the trainer here and not be the single point for everything. So, Chris, don't confuse the demo with the implementation.
Oh, but the implementation's easy. It's only going to take 20 minutes.
Yeah, no, it has a native integration, right? It has a native integration. How many times have you been told that?
Yeah, I like this topic because that's something that we talked about, that I based our presentation on there in summer camp, was being involved in those meetings, because usually as it goes is the orgs get sold on, this is the golden goose, this is going to fix all of your problems. And then they get sold it. And then whoever it lands upon is like, well, it'll help us, yes, but it's not going to fix everything. But then also bandwidth, or how much longer does it take to get spun up, and different things, whoever truly owns the tool. And then you kind of have that standpoint of like leadership's expecting like results overnight. But then trying to really put the best foot forward for your org is like, this, we need to do this right because we've already bought it,
Yeah. I get that a lot. We bought it. Can you just, I need it by Friday and it's Thursday.
Yeah.
And definitely. RACI charts too. I always put together a RACI chart. I think everybody knows what RACI is, but it says who's responsible, accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. Because not everybody needs to be involved, but the right people need to be involved in the beginning. And maybe the people who are the informed, they just need to know that you're getting this tool and it's going to be implemented on a certain date. That's it. They don't have to be trained. Maybe it's just people who just need to know you have the capability and you have the tool. So definitely do a RACI chart for all these tools. I also have a centralized spreadsheet. I started this, I think, when I was working at Docker a few years ago, because we weren't fully, I was on actually the IT data team at Docker, and then got moved to RevOps. And so I had an IT mentality already. I've worked in IT a lot. We do a lot of documentation. We do change management. We keep good records. So, I learned that by working in IT for a while. And so my spreadsheet would have all the tools, for sure, all the tools, the administrative owner of the tools, the champions in each team, a contact information for everybody, so that when someone leaves the company or goes on paternity, maternity leave, you can have a backup. Because how many times has that happened? Everyone remembers the year Marketo lost their domain. We all remember that, because the person who had that function to renew the domain got laid off, and that never got handed off to anybody else. So if they would have had a RACI of all these really important things that people were responsible for, that wouldn't have happened. Because if someone gets laid off or leaves, you immediately look at your chart and see if they were responsible for anything, and make sure you have a backup. So I have like links to contracts, contract expiration date, and then depending on who has access to it, how much you pay and what the terms were for each tool. Because I've been asked, during the pandemic, for the company I was working for, we need to reduce our spend by whatever, 15%, 20%. You need that spreadsheet to know that you don't have people buying stuff on their company credit cards and you have no idea who's spending money. So do the spreadsheet, think a little bit like an IT person for that part. And it's just so much easier. You won't be like scrambling around and looking for stuff. It's awesome. What other questions do we have? You guys are having a great discussion over here. They're all like talking amongst themselves. So yeah, someone says, how do you all think of the tool ownership? The centralized org owns the admins, and then you need to go find champions in the other teams. If it's a sales tool, they have to own some stuff too. You don't own the whole thing, right? Like for instance, take lean data, right? So if it's a RevOps team, it's tough when there's a separate sales ops team. You got to work really closely together. But if it's all centralized, there's a piece of lean data where somebody's got to build out, the flows. But there's another piece of lean data for the salespeople where they have to add salespeople. They have to, go in and set themselves to be out of office or set up the round robin rules, things like that. That's should be owned by sales, right? So you got to figure out, people have to have ownership. If they're going to buy tools in other teams, you have to find a champion in those teams, and they have to have some ownership.
Not having internal champions or champions on like the various teams that are engaging with the tool is the number one thing I've seen that causes tools to be bought, stood up, and then
never
not
adopted.
Used past 3 months. They think, oh, this is going to solve all of my problems. This is going to solve this very specific thing we're having an issue with. You do all of the work to get everyone onboarded and stood up, and then no one keeps it going because no one's using it.
That's the onboarding step is missing.
Yeah.
In that procurement process, the last step is somebody's responsible for onboarding whoever's going to use it.
And so, I reiterate back to Kelly's point earlier, is that That's so why it's so important to be involved in those meetings from the get-go to ask the right questions and vet properly. Like, how is this realistically going to impact my org? But I think the best question as you're an org and you're evaluating tech is like, why? Like, how does this fit into your overall tech stack, and how does this play into your overall strategy? And really there, because again, everybody looks at it like, perfect, this is going to take care of everything. I'm never going to have a duplicate again or something like that.
Oh gosh, we know that's not true. That's a MOPS lie right there, AJ.
AJ, do you have any ways in your consulting side that you've helped orgs really drive adoption of tools?
Well, really, we break it down and keep it simple and have them focus on either the KPIs that they've shared with us, or, we'll look and help them evaluate their current tech stack. This happens a lot, recently when teams are reshifting or new team members are getting onboarded, and we'll really just kind of help evaluate and look at the current tech stack and really just ask why and relate that back to what are you trying to solve for this year. And I always like to say, in a perfect world, if this was the golden answer for you, like, what are you hoping that this will do? And then try to use my expertise of what I know about the tool and what they're trying to accomplish with the rest of their tools that they currently have, and say, okay, will this get you there, or how much closer will it get you to that goal? And then I always reiterate with every tool, even Marketo, like, it's one piece of the puzzle. Like, there is no one tool that set it, forget it, it does it all for you, right?
Oh, come on. Sure it does. And it maintains itself. There's no support necessary or anything. Yeah. You mentioned something that actually that was my next question. I wanted to ask people on the call too. You get asked for KPIs a lot, and it's really hard to come up. What are the success metrics of a MOPS team? How do you prove to people who are spending all this money on your team and your tools that you're successful, that you did well? What are your KPIs? What do you measure to prove success? Anybody in the audience? This is such a hard question. Did I stump you all? Come on.
I think so. Like, I hope this doesn't sound like a cop-out answer, but I think some of this depends on what the metrics and the KPIs of your marketing org are, I think, and who you're marketing to and supporting. I know a lot of marketing teams, as they're evolving, have really focused on just new business and like demand gen for new business. But as orgs kind of look to diversify their revenue mix and expand into like cross-sell and upsell, a lot of MOPS orgs are starting to support customer marketing and customer functions. And so what may have been your org's KPIs when you were super growth and like new biz revenue only driven change as you start to support customer marketing and customer growth to some degree. So I think the answer is to some degree. It depends a little bit on what the marketing KPIs of the marketing org you're supporting are.
I struggle with this, but I don't know if I'm going to agree with you on that. I'll
Okay.
agree with you somewhat, but because I have no control over content, how bad that email was, right? I have control on deliverability. But if I can make, let's say, if people are just writing horrible emails that are landing in spam traps, or they want to email people too often, right? And if I can't push back and say no, I can educate them and say your deliverability is terrible because of XYZ. But things that I can't control, the quality of an MQL, right? I can control the scoring and how they move through life cycle, but salespeople are always going to complain about the quality of MQLs. Always, they will. But what you can control, I think, is the data that's visible, full funnel data visibility. If somebody looks at a dashboard and the data's clean and it's concise and you can tell the story with it, that to me is a great success. That's one of that I would say KPIs is being able to do multi-touch attribution and that sort of stuff, so people can actually see the data.
Yeah, I guess I more so mean if your marketing org is metriced on MQLs as opposed to like MQL to the next stage or closed won conversion rates, then your marketing ops KPIs would be around things that support those metrics. So enabling them to build programs, push people, time to program build, things that support the metrics your other org has, more so than like you actually delivering on MQL attainment, because Lord knows most people on this call probably shouldn't write copy. I know I for sure shouldn't write copy.
I should not write copy.
Chris says, should MQLs go away? Well, you could call it something else, but I do think it all comes down, everything comes down to data. I do. I think it all comes back to data. And anytime there's a KPI, it's about data, right? So, and anytime someone, asks for something like a build of something or a tool or whatever, I always, the first question is to work backwards and say, what kind of data do you want in the end? Right? What do you want to see? What are you trying to find out? What's the business question you're trying to answer here? That's, I think, where we could be measured on KPIs for sure. Can they answer the business questions with all of this stuff we've cobbled together and the data that we've kept clean and accurate, so you can make intelligent business decisions? But yeah.
And the one that ties into this, that common theme that I'm sure you both have seen, is that it's the argument between some orgs really care about how much records are in Marketo or how much people actually live versus the quality, and it always comes to ultimatum when we're doing like a health check or like helping orgs clean up their database and doing all that, is you have a ton of leads that have just either bounced or clearly unsubscribed for years or just.
But they might buy something, AJ. You can't delete them. They might.
And it's always the constant argument of like, why not remove them? But to Kelly's point, is there's that philosophy that they might, and in my mind, if, let's, to keep it simple, if you always start the game with -10 points, you're always going to start with -10 points. So, why not cut that? But to me, it's a very simple solution. It's quality over quantity, but it amazes me that is a huge skill blocker for a lot of organizations.
I worked with a sales leader who used to ask, is it a volume question, or is a volume complaint or a volume complaint, when his sales reps or the sales team would express frustration about something. And what he was getting at was like, is there a lot of them, or are you just being particularly loud about the issue? Which I loved. And he would make the sales leaders that reported to him come with the data whenever they were saying that things increased from a quantity perspective, and usually it was actually not the case, or the inverse. And I've tried to adapt that phrase and drive that into my team of ask, is it a volume or a volume question?
That's pretty good. So this just reminded me of this is one of those debates. Danielle brought it up. This is one of those debates. The contacts and leads. People will die on that hill if only contacts, we don't do leads. Are you leads and contacts, or just a contacts? Let's take a vote here. I have a very strong opinion on this, but do you guys have contacts and leads, Jessica?
We do. My only strong hill I will die on is don't do leads only, because I've seen orgs do leads only and then something gets converted to a contact and then re-engages and there is a new lead created. So as long as you're not doing that, I'm happy.
Oh, what about you, AJ?
So
I'm the contacts guy.
You're only contacts?
No, leads and contacts.
Thank you. Oh God, we all agree. Okay.
Absolutely.
I was just gonna have to eject you from this meeting. If you
Kick you out of the.
No, I remember having this debate at one of the last companies I worked for, and also on LinkedIn. Boy, it was a hot topic of people just saying, and the reason at this company that I worked for, I couldn't believe it. And I've seen it a couple of times, why they didn't want leads and contacts, because they claimed it was too hard in Salesforce for the salespeople. They couldn't see leads and contacts at the same time in the same list. And that was the reason. So all these contacts were re-MQLing and coming through, and they were good MQLs, but they were never seen because the SDRs were looking at leads and the account managers were only looking at their accounts. Like, I was blown away that it was just because it was too hard to look at.
Here's the campaign with campaign members object in Salesforce. It allows you to see both in one report.
Yeah, there
Build
are many
formula
ways.
fields on your campaign member to pull data down or write data down, whatever is more appropriate. Beautiful. Here's a single view. You can look at both of them. Also, just open 2 windows.
There are ways to solve that problem.
Yeah, and as a consultant, I mean, obviously, I deal with quite a few clients. Been doing this for going on 4 years now. I don't think I've had one team that does silos in on one that doesn't have a problem somewhere down the road, like at all. There's zero.
Yeah. I think part of it is because most companies only think about the prospect life cycle and don't have a customer life cycle. And you can have both. Spoiler, you can have both, right? Have a customer life cycle and have a prospect life cycle. And someone, for goodness sakes, has to pay attention to your current customers for upsell, cross-sell.
I also think it's because a lot of people don't necessarily think through, like, not every sale is going to close win the first time, right? There's going to be people who talk to your sales team and close lose for a variety of reasons. And so they're now a contact, hopefully attached to an opportunity. And you want to engage with, nurture, deliver relevant content and give them a path to say, hey, I'm interested again, sell me your software or whatever it is you sell. And if you have leads only, that person either gets ignored or lost, or you create a duplicate, neither of which are a scalable solution.
No.
Yeah. And being scalable, I've always, I did track in high school, so I always relate it back to the mile relay. Like with marketing and sales and everything that we do, it's just, at least how I look at my position, I am trying to maximize the effort that I'm giving to eventually hand off the baton. But once I hand off the baton, it's also out of my control. But it is a team effort for us to get that first place. So, it's really, how do we make that transition of the baton smooth as possible? And it just takes, real synergy and working to Jessica's point, that things are scalable. So,
yeah. I want to point out one thing before this is a great topic still, but if anybody is on this call who's new to this industry, I want you to notice how much knowledge these people have outside of just MOPS. Understanding how your company sells and your life cycle and how other people in other organizations work is super important to build scalable systems and processes. You need to understand all of that if you want to move up and get promoted and sort of expand outside of MOPS. So I didn't want to let that go, because it's super important when people say, what do I need to know? You need to understand beyond your little bubble.
Go do like ride-alongs or shadowing, I think, is a great way to get that. So go find an SDR or whatever your inbound sales team is, and do a ride along with them for an hour. Show me how you run your day. Show me how you prospect. Show me how you engage with our database. And then, like, same thing on the customer side. Go do that with whatever team engages with, hopefully, your current customers, whether that's like AMs or CSMs. Understand that. I think from a systems perspective is really beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. Someone was asking about issues with contacts only. you're missing a whole metric. If you convert everybody to a contact, you're missing the entire metric of, conversions to close one and things like that. If everybody's a contact, the whole front end of the funnel is just, the top of funnel stuff is kind of, the conversion thing is lost.
I've also seen issues with appropriately matching, which I think there's solutions you can dig into there. But like when I've seen orgs try and do contacts only, a lot of those orgs will limit, you have to give us your business email for things so that they can correctly match you to an account, which you're prioritizing your own internal needs over the experience of the prospect. Like, I don't want to give you my business email. I just want to read your white paper. Let me have it. And when you do things like that, you often impact the experience of the prospect. I
totally agree with that. We have, somebody's got Slack notifications on. Is that you, AJ? I hear the knock brush. It's triggering to me. I have all my notifications. So anybody have any other questions? Because I think we only have like 5 minutes left, which means we can't discuss anything really in depth. But I will ask my people, Jessica and AJ, because this is my favorite question. Do your friends understand what you do? The ones who are not in the industry, what do you tell them you do? How do you explain that?
It's hard, but I have just come to just say I'm a consultant. And this is basically as far as I can get it. And then if I need to explain it even further, and this is like the worst way of probably explaining it, but this is just the only way my friends seem to understand it, is just, okay, imagine, when you sign up for something, all the emails, kind of part of that in some bigger, larger form. So. And
then they glaze over and change the subject, right?
Yeah, or if I'm staying, they'll really get it, or they'll get not mind blown, but just kind of like, like if I'm.
And they stop you. If you get into the weeds, they stop you. Anybody else in the comments can explain what they do to your family or people who aren't in the industry?
I laughed at Jeff in the comments, says my wife even has zero idea, and ditto about my husband. Zero clue, doesn't understand, thinks I write and send emails for a living. I think often people under a certain age kind of sort of get it when you say I help marketers with connecting all their systems to make sure their things are the most efficient and effective. But anyone over a certain age, so my parents and their friends, no clue.
Kimmy, I solve puzzles for a living. I tell people I support all the infrastructure that makes sales and marketing dreams come true.
Yeah.
I say all those systems underneath, that stuff doesn't happen by itself. Those automated messages you get, that's the bad part of what I do. I work in IT. Yes, Catherine, people will understand that. I work in IT for sales and marketing. It sounds so, I don't know.
I make it so other people can do their jobs.
There you go. Yeah. Alice says when you fill out a form, everything that happens after that, I'm in charge of keeping everything still working. That's good. I like it. Digital mechanic. There's another one.
Kimmy, I feel the same way. I get really defensive when people complain about cookies. Okay, but also you probably buy shit from personalized ads all the time, so you probably actually like them.
Yeah. So, all right, we have time for one more question. Is there anything topic-wise, you guys, that we missed that you really want? I know we could talk for hours, but we can't. So, anything else?
I'm seeing one on our brainstorm list that I'm curious, rapid fire. What's something in the MOPS world that you both would say is overrated, and what about something that's underrated?
Kelly,
I don't know what you mean by that. You answer that first then, because I'm not sure what you mean by that. What's overrated and what's underrated?
I can chime in. I'd say the overrated is what we talked about a little bit earlier, fill the database, get as many leads as you can. Overrated. Underrated is alignment, in both houses, in both your market automation platform and your CRM. Completely underrated, and keeping it clean.
Keeping it clean.
Yeah. Like I feel like we say it, but it's one thing to say it, and then a lot of teams just don't live it, It's easier said than done.
Underrated documentation, Kimmy says.
Preach on the documentation one.
Yeah.
I recently saw, and I think said this in the book, on LinkedIn, say, when you leave your job, make your documentation so good that your predecessor will find you and message you, thank you for the documentation. And if you don't have documentation that level of good, that's what you should be striving for. I know I don't, and it's my guiding principle right now.
Yeah, I always try to look at it like, if someone new were to start tomorrow and you gave them a task, would they have the ability to understand where everything is based off the documentation and get caught up? Because in a weird way, like, I know it's super crazy, but in a weird way, that's what happens is, from a bandwidth perspective, people are kind of having to catch on really quick, and they're having to figure out, learn months worth of where the org has been in 2 weeks worth of time. And the better the documentation is, the better to help eliminate that curve. It's never going to be perfect, but from zero documentation to at least documenting the processes, centralization, to
process documentation. There's an underrated process documentation. It's not all just in your head. Have you ever walked into an org where that documentation existed? Nope. Nope. I mean, I do think you could write and write and write and write, and it would never be enough, but it's something. We're looking in the comments here. Underrated data quality. Yes, because you're making financial decisions based on your data, and if you think it's not important,
Chris, I was waiting for that. I was waiting for somebody to say MQLs are overrated in the chat.
Totally. Can we just have more MQLs? I've seen people, I swear, I've been in meetings where someone says, can we just lower the bar? They needed more MQLs. So let's just lower the scoring threshold or whatever they're using to make an MQL. I'm like, wow, okay, that makes no sense. You're getting volume, but not quality. Yeah. So, yeah. Look at it. Kim Danker, if the entire department won the lottery and quit tomorrow, would a brand new person know what to do?
Ooh, that's another good way of looking at it.
I don't know. I think long live MQLs, as long as you care about pipe. Yeah, exactly. As long as you can see the whole funnel, MQLs have a place, just not a time. Just not.
Call them what you want. You need an effective mechanism to pass interest to your sales team. Like, you just do. So
I think we're out of time. We have managed to talk your ears off for 50 minutes now. And I loved all the chat. I love it. So thank you guys so much for attending.